Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And here we are, the end of 2022. We're in November, season 3, and I have another special guest. Today, I'm getting to talk to PBA Hall of Fame member, Chris Barnes. Chris competes on the PBA and PBA50 Tour. He's also competed on Team USA, and he currently serves as a pro staffer for 900 Global, Vise, and Coolwick. And Chris, hey, I'm glad to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Bruce. Thanks a lot. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Your energy is certainly catching, and as a lot of your other guests have been, product in your environment is a big thing, and so being around you is a good thing.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show. Listen, I always like to reflect when I met my guests or when they came in the path. And for you, and you probably don't remember the first time, but I remember the first time I saw you. It was in Wichita, Kansas. I was bowling with some friends at I think it was a USBC event, but there was a side tournament. I think it was called the Bowlers Journal Tournament. And it was at North Rock Lanes in, I don't know, maybe it's 87, 88, somewhere around there.
1989.
Okay, 1989. And someone said, hey, that's Chris Barnes. Watch him. And I watched you and I was like, man, he's got game I've never even seen. 1989. So you were in school then.
I was a freshman. I wasn't very good. I didn't get to bowl the Bowlers Journal much because I didn't have $50 to enter. Uh, and so, I mean, some of the guys, Justin Romick, who was
Yeah.
a senior that year, he basically spent his senior year out there making money bowling the Bowlers Journal every day. And I just was a bowling alley rat. And I was kind of out there watching and trying to learn. And he was one of him and Rick Sealsmith are guys that I was watching every day, trying to get a little better. I
Oh
wanted to be
man,
who they were.
you're starting to say some names that are just all of a sudden I'm going back in time. Justin Romick, Steele Smith. There were so many, Lonnie Wallachek. There were
Yeah.
so many great bowlers from that era when I was around. Hey, I just want to read real quick for those who don't know. You've won 19 PBA Tour titles. It might have changed since I've got my information. During your 20-year career, you've won both PBA Rookie of the Year and PBA Player of the Year. You are also, I thought this interesting, one of 8 players in PBA history to earn the career Triple Crown, which was been accomplished by winning the U.S. Open, the PBA World Championship, and the PBA Tournament of Champions. And then in 2017, I thought this was pretty special. I remember when I heard it. You were elected to the PBA Hall of Fame, and then of course you've rolled. I know it's a lot more than this. I think this is just on tour. 55, count them 55, 300 perfect games in PBA competition, including what I think is iconic, and that is a televised 300 game. And when we
Yeah.
were talking offline, you are also currently serving as the president for the PBA Players Committee. So that's pretty special. You've done a lot of things for PBA.
Well, we're trying to give a little back. They've certainly done a lot for me. Bowling all the way around has given me my career, my family, everything that we've done is kind of one way or the other been centric around bowling, and so I wouldn't have the wife I have without that, and therefore the family and everything else. It's certainly gone a lot further than I thought it would ever go from a little modest place in Topeka, Kansas.
I got to tell you, I'm energized, and those listen to the show, they know when we're talking bowling, like I get energized. I'm super excited about this conversation. And speaking of your wife, I also had the last line, and it's married to one of the greatest female bowlers of all time. Your wife, Linda, she's also a member of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, she's in a bunch. She's in more Hall of Fames than I'm in. I like to say that. Well, I don't always like to say it, but it's true. And she's in the USBC Hall of Fame. She's in the World Bowling Hall of Fame. About 1 million of them in California. And she was the star of tomorrow. She's more than accomplished everything on her own, and it's great to share the ride with somebody who completely understands both sides of tour life, which is certainly not for everyone.
Well, you're both pretty special, and and I want to get into our conversation. But you also, when I really started connecting with both you and Linda's, when you started really pushing the JDRF event that to raise money, and so we're going to talk more about that as well. And super excited to have you on today. And hey, I want to just kick off the show. First of all, I would love for you to share who is Global 900 and how do you serve your customers?
Well, 900 Global, it's a ball manufacturing company. They produce bowling balls. It's a brand. And it's one of three brands that's made now out of Utah, out there next to Salt Lake. And so what I am is basically a brand ambassador for them. They're a lead staff player. So at the height of my powers, I guess my job was basically just to make TV shows and make them look good. And then as I've aged, that turns more into trade shows and going around and on a more grassroots level to go along with that.
Hey, I want to ask you this as you're sitting here talking. For those, I know there's some bowlers listening today. How have, in your interview view, you talked about, back in 1989, you're trying to figure this game out, and here we are in 2022. How have bowling balls changed?
Well, like everything, it's bowling balls in 1989 weren't quite wood rackets, but they weren't necessarily not, I guess, compared to the tennis rackets. With the materials get better, the strings get better, and it's much the same in bowling balls. You had a urethane cover stock they could hook, and then it's progressed onto a much more responsive type cover stock that responds to the oil in the lane and the dry. The cores inside of them have become more dynamic with radiuses of gyration and differential, and to create constant friction on the lane as the ball flares. And it's turned into a whole physics project to create a bowling ball, which I've been lucky enough to be involved with now, and trying to mix and match cover stocks and cores and dynamics and the environment, which changes all the time, and then try and get all that right for 3 million people out there that throw a bowling ball. It's it's quite the endeavor, and it's been a great challenge, but one that I really enjoy that part of the process.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll be watching bowling with friends, and I'll say, "Listen, man, those guys make it look so easy. They got the equipment, they know the lanes. It's just it's a lot of fun just kind of watching the game continue and progress." Hey, I want to get into your story. I would love for people to know the Chris Barnes story. Like where'd you grow up, and what's kind of led you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like a lot of people, there's a lot of good things and a few bad ones that kind of shape you along the way. But I grew up in Topeka, Kansas. Wonderful mother, super supportive, and a dad who is my best friend and still shapes the ideals that I think a good father should be. Unfortunately, our house burnt down when I was just before I turned 11, and he passed in that fire. And so it certainly shaped and changed how I looked at things, how I did things. And so a traumatic event, and it sure focused me into doing some things a little bit differently, and but hopefully in a way that made him proud along the way.
I guarantee he's proud of you. Looking down right now, I'm so sorry about that, but I appreciate you sharing that. So you grew up in Kansas.
I grew up in Kansas, and I was an athlete. He taught me every sport, and so I had a little head start, and so I was pretty good at most sports. And then,
and by the way, you say pretty good at most sports. Something that I didn't share earlier. One of the things I love about having people on the show is I do do a little research, and this is something I didn't know, Chris. Prior to your bowling career, you were also a member of the Professional Putt Putt Association. Like, you made a TV appearance.
I did make a TV show. I laugh about it that I love playing basketball. My mom worked at a nursery, a greenery, and they had two passes to this place called Sports Center, and it had a little par 3 course and a couple of putt-putt courses. So as things were in the summer, she would drop me and my best friend at the time, and off in the morning at 8 a.m. and at 5 o'clock she'd pick us up, and you'd go tool around that little par 3 all day, and then you'd play putt-putt over and over. And I was out there still before she picked me up, and they had a tournament, and one of the guys was like, "I don't know who this kid is playing the orange ball, but he's he's making a lot of shots and not really playing some of the right ones, but he's making them. And like, told me about the tournaments, and one thing led to another. And pretty soon I'm part of the Midwest Putters Association. And 4 years later, I parlayed that into winning Region 9 and playing on TV. And as much as I wanted Billy Packer to call a game for me at some point, I was dreaming about that as a basketball player, not a putt-putt guy. But Billy Packer did call a game for me. So I guess one way or the other, my dream was realized for a moment.
I love that. I love that. I always like to talk about, my first book I wrote called Find Your Lane. I always like to talk about purpose. And, here you are, you're enjoying sports as a teenager. You love basketball, you get into bowling. Talk a little bit about like when you found your lane, when you really knew that, hey, I really like this game of bowling. I'm pretty good at it. And I'd like to make a career out of it.
Yeah, it changed at the end of high school. Let's
Okay.
say I wanted to play basketball, physical limitations, skill limitations, whether I wanted to admit it or not at the time. I was a Division II guy, and I bowled tournaments in Kansas, but like the guys you mentioned before, Lonnie Wallachek and Billy Murphy and Chad Murphy and these guys, they were all better than me. And so that's all I knew. I just bowled really on the weekends, and I'd go bowl some tournaments once or twice a year, and those guys all had higher averages. And I'm like, well, if I'm fifth or sixth best in Kansas, I'm not that bad at math. That puts me, 250th or whatever. It's not where I thought I wanted to be. And I finally made it out of the state to the national tournament, and only one per state made it. And it was pretty much dumb luck, but that moment changed everything for me, because then I got to see the national stage, and all 5 of those guys were better than everybody that was there. The year I was there happened to be, I was 18, a 16-year-old Jack Zunica out of Oklahoma, year-old stomping grounds. I happened to be there the first time I met Happy Jack, and Happy Jack ended up winning that tournament. But it was eye-opening to me to what the rest of the world looked like. And we just happened to have a pocket of super talented guys in that Wichita area that were really good, and they were as good as anybody in the country. Turned out all of us ended up bowling in college, against guys from Nebraska. It seemed like a lot for national titles the next few years. But that moment I went, oh, you know what? I might be able to do this bowling thing at a pretty high level versus going to play small college ball for, a few years and then moving my way onto a job. And I'd already moved furniture by that point. So I knew I didn't really want to do that. So getting a college degree was going to be on the docket. And I'd done some landscaping, and it's landscaping was at least rewarding, but it's not easy work.
That's funny. So you knew you didn't want to move furniture. I left bowling to go move furniture. That is hilarious. I love that. But you've been doing this for a long time, and I'm sure when you got out there, everybody's competing against each other, like who wants to help who. But I'm sure there were like some mentors or some people that helped you on your journey. Can you talk a little bit about some of the people that helped you along the way?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate. I had a high school coach who ended up being a legend in Kansas sports, and they took the basketball court off of me. But one of the things that was obvious, whether you're star or the last guy on the bench, was that accountability was a huge, huge thing. Toughest coach I ever had, but he had your back on game days, and you knew that too. But the one thing about bowling is it's not like golf. It's not like you don't have coaches all the time. You don't have all this sort of stuff. So the only way you get better is in the off time is you're practicing, and you're on your own to make yourself accountable and to be better. And that part surely served me well beyond my peer group when I got to college, and it was up to me to try and get better as the last guy to make the C team my freshman year at Wichita State to run that way through college. And by the time I was on my second year, I snuck on the last spot on the A team, parlayed that into being an All-American. The next year, I did not do well at qualifying. I ended up like 8th, so I was back on the B team again, and won a couple of tournaments. But again, I had to make myself accountable and really look at, all right, it's easy to go, life's unfair. This happened, that happened. This is not right. I've earned my thing there, but there's nothing that carries over. And it's a lesson that parlayed into life as well, that what you did yesterday doesn't necessarily mean that you get extra bonus pins for tomorrow. And so I had to go back to the drawing board and address the things that I wasn't as good at. And the next year that parlayed into being on the first team and the collegiate player of the year.
Yeah.
All those setbacks eventually made me better, but I didn't really like them as they were punching me in the face along the way.
Did you find yourself, speaking of mentors, did you find yourself once you really had success? I'm curious, did you find yourself helping others come up behind you?
Not at first a whole lot. I was a little immature that way.
Yep.
And to be honest, the environment was not set up very well that way. Until I was comfortable enough in my own skin, I wasn't a good help to the people around me. I had to get okay with me, be a little more comfortable with who I was and abilities. And then once I could do that, then I was able to help a lot of people, I think, at least with little pieces. Some people want it, some people don't. It's always an interesting thing when it's an individual sport like that and you're competing with the same guys that you're giving advice. They don't always trust you a whole lot that you're telling them the truth.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on. I mean, I talk to people in the workplace all the time, and here we are in team environments. Everybody's trying to help the team, but I have found that people really get a lot of fulfillment when they're helping others. Even though, I mean, even for me, I've had competitors in the workplace that come to me and say, "Hey, I see you do this. How do you do this?" And I'll give that to. I don't know if I would have done that 30 years ago, right? But today I find myself doing that. Hey, I want to ask you this. I want to talk leadership here on the lanes. I once heard Lou Holtz. I love. He's such a great motivator. He shared that being number one, like he feared that most. He feared people being complacent, and I would love for you to talk about how you have been able to stay on top throughout your career on the lanes, because I mean you've been on top for a long time, and you've been able to stay there. I know you talked about accountability a little bit. Talk a little bit about how you've been able to stay on top.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because I think there's two things. It's really hard to get to the top. And I think it's even harder, which a lot of guys like Lou Holtz, Nick Saban has a lot of great quotes, wherever you feel about Alabama, but he has a lot of great quotes about leadership and about approaches and life philosophies that he teaches his players too, much like Holtz does. And it's hard to stay at the top. And I had a few tricks. I kept much like some of your other guests, whether it's the 3 core principles or it's your perception of the outside world, whether stupidity or my own judgmental. But I like to play poor, so to speak. Originally, that was a driver for me. I wanted to make enough to survive, to make it through, provide for my family, make sure that they had the things that I didn't have. As I got more successful, unfortunately, it didn't make it a super fun. I didn't always enjoy those wins as much before I kind of tried to bust myself back down to a place of I need to keep working at it. If I wasn't still learning, then somebody else was either getting closer or was going to pass me up. You get whatever it is. I got a big prize fund check, and that, maybe you buy something nice for the family or occasionally myself. And then the rest of it just went away. And I got back to that number that made me feel like, hey, you got to keep going. You got to push harder. You got to do better. It's been interesting reading other books, listen to the leadership podcasts like some of the guests you've had, and seeing some of the tricks and things that they've done. And really, a lot of times they're not that much different in life and business that they are in sports. Having some core principles like some of your guests have had, and adhering to those, and continuing to keep trying to improve no matter how much success you're having.
I once was at a gym one time, and I had a lady. She said, "Why do you keep coming to the gym? Like you're in shape." And I said, I heard a quote from Will Smith one time. It said, "It's easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape."
Yeah.
And I thought about that's really how I've tried to approach my everyday as well. It's like, you build all this momentum. You just don't want to go backwards. You just got to keep on working hard and remember how you got there. Hey, I want to talk about something that I have kind of a love-hate relationship with, and that's failure. I wanted to ask you the question about, how you approach failure. I mean, as an athlete, you get in these tournaments, and now all of a sudden you're bowling for titles and they don't work out. I was actually reading, I think one year you had 12 TV appearances with zero titles. And I know that when you get to that TV appearance, like you're like, hey, this is the moment. And then when it doesn't work out, and not just it didn't work out once, several times that year, how have you been able to, and for people that are listening on the show, I mean, we all fail. How have you been able to bounce back from failure? How do you approach that?
Well, like a lot of people, like you say, that you've had on here, product environment's a big deal, but how you deal with failure is huge. How you deal with success and how you deal with failure. And I always use it as a motivator, as a driver for me. That was the greatest, worst year.
The greatest, worst year ever. I love that.
Because lots of times when you fail at a sport, or say in my sport, at bowling, nobody ever sees it. Very few people at the local level see you fail week to week to week. And I got to a level where I was competing at a pretty high level every week, but not quite good enough. Not quite good enough on that last day. And it was tough. That one took on a life of its own, because it became a talking point as well for the outside world. And it took me a little while to own that one a little bit in my own contributions, aside from the fact that you're playing the best players in the world at that week. And they're also happen to be pretty good. But I had to take some accountability there. And I didn't really want to for a while on that one. It's like, well, it's shorter format. It's bad luck. It's, the lanes were different. I got a bad break. But in the end, there was an approach and some things that I was doing that changed on those TV show days, that it wasn't part of my normal routine and environment, so to speak, the rest of the week. And once I addressed that, then it got better. I had to be willing to take some outside help and a little criticism and chew on it a little bit and figure out a way to spit it back out in a way that made sense and led to some more success. But dealing with failure, it can be tricky. Keeping your self-confidence intact and coming back out there and coming out for another fight.
I love how you said, you didn't say I got past it. You said I learned to get better at it. I'm the same way, because, I continue to fail. And I tell people all the time, listen, if you're failing, you're growing. You are growing, and like it or not, you're growing. I've failed so many times where you have that black cloud over your head and it just hovers, and you're just like, I just can't shake this. But, you just continue to work through the process, keep getting better. And then all of a sudden it goes away. And, people see that. I think what you said it best. They see kind of the tip of the iceberg. They see you on TV winning, but they don't see all those moments, do they?
No, they don't. And, they talk about failure. Did you enjoy success, or did you, fear failure? And I don't think I feared failure. I hated failure. and then for 20 wins and 400 events, there's a lot of failure. I mean, they talk about baseball players.
Yeah.
They get more than we get. If winning is the only thing that makes it better. And for a while, that's how I was wired. Now I had to find some balance there though too. You had to be able to figure out some ways to enjoy some of the successes, so that along the way the ride was a little bit better, and it wasn't such a butt kicking every time you went out there. I got to a point where the thread got so thin that I was playing at the top level on a really consistent basis for quite a while, that the only thing that seemed like it was good was winning. And then, well, that's what I was supposed to do. And then everything else was failure. And I had to find a little better balance to that while still working hard. What you said was great about staying on top or keeping momentum and staying in shape. I always thought it was super easy as long as I went and practiced a little bit every day when I was feeling good. Then it didn't go away. The last thing I ever want to do is take time off.
I'm glad you said that, because for those, out there, they see people and they're in these tournaments and they see them win, and they don't see the practice they put in. And, even in the workplace, I remember whenever I wanted to start speaking, I went to a Toastmasters group and I started speaking and practicing and learning. And, 20 years later, I heard a guy, I wrote it in my book. He said, "Hey, Bruce, you're a natural." And it just took me back to Toastmasters when I was, and just terrible, right? Just trying to get better during that time. But I had a lot of failure moments to get there.
Yeah, there's no shortcuts to it. And, you hear the same thing. When you're winning, everybody goes, oh, that game's, that's a great game. They're not like, oh, it's a natural. I'm like, well, I can show you what 18 looked like. And it sure didn't look like that.
I love that. Hey, today you're an ambassador of the game. I heard you use that word ambassador. I like that a lot. Here you are, seasoned professional. How have you, I'm curious, you talked about where you were before. How have you changed personally, from a young pro to here you are, a Hall of Famer, you're representing the game, you're the president of the Players Committee. Can you kind of share a little bit about what you've become?
Yeah. Early on, I kind of felt like I was from an area where, and that the group was in Wichita. So I was kind of the outsider going in. And then I bowled on the amateur team, and that's a lot of East Coast, West Coast stuff was going on at the big tournaments, or in Texas. And I wasn't from any of those places. And so I kind of had a little bit of a lone wolf thing and a little insecure. And so I embraced, the little standoffish thing and kind of kept everybody away from me. And false confidence to hide my own lack of confidence at times. And as I finally got comfortable in my own skin, obviously that let me, hey, I got something. If you're interested, I got something that might help. And it kind of starts like that, and then you help a couple of guys, with a tip here or there, and pretty soon. And it's been much more fun on the PBA 50 Tour, because there's some of those guys you bowl with on tour when you're 20s and 30s, they're on that PBA 50, but lots of guys are just guys that are really successful at life. And that part's super cool, because success is success and whatever you're good at, but now they want to follow their passion. At 50, they've already had a business that's led them to a place to where they can jump in an RV and go tour around the country and bowl tournaments because they love to bowl. And those guys are super fun to help because they appreciate it. They work hard. You can understand where they're trying to get to, and certainly much more free with information and helping however you can. And it's much more rewarding. And early on, I didn't see it through the right lens for quite a while until I got around, better environments and around people that helped me understand, open my eyes to how to do it, so I could feel the part back about, hey, you know what, that's cool to watch them succeed. And it doesn't have to be anything in it for me for it to be a great thing. And it turned out to be more rewarding at times than any of my own success.
I love that. I love I can feel the joy that you have being around these men and women who have, you said success at life. You didn't say bowling, you said at life. And I love that. I have a quote in my book that says, it's easy to look back and see what it took to have success in your career, but it's so hard to look ahead as a young professional to see what it's going to take and what it all looks like. And so that's incredible. Hey, you're also the co-host of a podcast called the Beef and Barnzy Show. I've watched it.
Yeah.
I watched it a few times. You also, the co-host is Stu Williams, another incredible professional bowler. And I would love for you to talk about, like, what do you enjoy about the podcast? Because like you started this I think it was during the pandemic time. But you continue to do it. You all both look like you're having fun. You have on great guests. What do you enjoy about it? And what do you hope people get from watching the show?
Well, yeah, it did start during the pandemic because Stu's a kind of a middle, I'd say a middle guy. He's in the 20s ranking wise on tour. And so always trying to provide.
To me,
value.
That's a top guy.
Yeah, but bowling and golf are at different levels. So to really make a good living, I mean, you depended on sponsor money, and we wanted to provide some value to our sponsors. We have the same general ones. And so thought, well, instead of just sitting around here doing nothing, this gives us something to do. And that's like a lot of people. What do? You're sitting at home in March. And first time in my life, not only am I sitting at home for 7 days a week, I can't go anywhere, and I don't know what I'm I'm itchy. I don't know what to do. Linda's trying to plan travel for me. We can't go anywhere. She's trying to get me out of the house. As long as we've ever been together in the same place in our whole marriage. But we started the same age. We'd done some things and in tournaments where we were either eliminated or in between squads, and we're both pretty opinionated. We both think we're smarter than we are, but we don't agree that much. And so it made for an interesting viewpoints on some different things. He's English. He's from the UK, so he's got a great accent. As far as a podcast, I couldn't hope for anybody better, because if I don't feel like talking that day, it won't matter. There will be no empty space. He can fill all of it. He's the gift of gab. Is he is the Santa Claus of gab. So
and he's super funny. He is super funny. That's what he's very entertaining, and that's what people want, right?
Well, like I found with a lot of people, he's an easy laugh. He, obviously not everybody has every day, but in general, he has a very positive outlook on life. He's easy to laugh. He's very honest. He's authentic, I guess.
Like that.
And over time, I've really found that to be very true. The players that I've gravitated to before I knew them and watched them on TV, the players I gravitated to when I met them, and I didn't know why I didn't really connect with them, and then met them in person, went, oh, well, that's because that's not who you are when you're on TV.
Yeah.
And then the ones that were who they were, Marshall Holman was always a guy for me. Not everybody liked his, antics or demonstrative nature, but that's 100% who he was. And there was no fake about it. David Ozio, on the other hand, was the prototypical professional, but the TV show was an act for him. And so I wasn't drawn to that. And then when I met him in person, liked him a lot, but that wasn't the thing. He was trying to be somebody else on TV that wasn't him. Early on in my career, I was expected to be the college kid, all-American guy, whatever. And so it took a little of the edge off of what I was too. And as I got more comfortable with, hey, I could be myself and be okay, not get vilified for being a little edgier or a little more aggressive, then some of the things, successes followed that when I became a little more authentic to who I am.
I love that. I love your authenticity. You're right, Stu. Very authentic, and I love his interviews because he'll be real funny, and then he can switch it to be real serious, ask a real serious question, and really adds incredible value to the show. I'm going to put a copy of the link in the show notes so people can click on that link and check that out. Hey, I want to ask you lastly about leadership as a dad. You are a dad to a couple of pretty incredible young men. Both Ryan and Troy. Ryan is having a great start to a college career. When I say great, I guess I should use the word exceptional. He's super inspiring to watch there at Wichita State. I want to ask you first about Ryan. I want to ask you, what do you enjoy most about watching him, coaching him, mentoring him as a dad?
Yeah, I think the key to all of that is just getting out of the way and letting Linda do it. No.
That's fantastic. That's a good answer.
They bowled, but they didn't bowl a lot. That wasn't a passion for them at 12, 13. They liked other sports. They liked different things. And Ryan in particular was very good at basketball again and baseball and did all those things. And so he didn't really bowl very much. So I didn't ever think my niche area of expertise was ever going to really apply and be able to share that with him. And then the pandemic hit and he couldn't go visit some of the small schools, which is kind of where his fit was basketball wise as well. And then he decided, well, let's just try this. You did it. How hard could it be? Kind of thing. And he didn't say it out loud, but I know he was thinking it. He's like,
and he's done it, and he's done it well. He's a two-hander.
Yeah. 2.5 years later, he went from, he wasn't a scratch bowler, let alone that. And last year he ended up being an All-American at Wichita State. And the fact that we get to share father-son time together like that, and he's actually very receptive to the information, which is maybe the surprising thing at this point when he's obviously growing into being a man and being able to make a lot of his own choices and choose his own paths, that he still seeks out some of that, versus me shoving it down his throat.
I think it's pretty cool just watching you two together. And then of course I see, his brother Troy's got the real high Chris Barnes backswing, left-handed, but it's a high backswing. I'm like, I could not do that. It's been a lot of fun watching both of them. But I want to also talk about when I really started getting to know you and Linda more was when you were putting on the JDRF bowling event in AMF Louisville, raising lots of money for diabetes. And I want to ask you a little bit about JDRF and what that organization means to you, because I want people that are listening to the show, they may also be connected in some way, and I want them to hear like the story.
Well, we researched the 2 or 3 main charities that kind of serve the juvenile diabetes
Yeah.
arena, so to speak, and we just felt like they had the best ratio of how much of the funds went out to. And it's been a few years since I actually researched it, but it was over 86%, which was fairly phenomenal compared to a lot of charities across a lot of different areas. Now, I think all of them do great work. We just felt like at the time that they had the highest percentage that went into it. They split it up into 3 different fields, like living technologies and things that make quality of life better, and then a couple different arenas of in the cure side of things. And so we felt like that was where we'd hope, if we got to choose, they could do better, more good, and than we could just individually taking our small piece. And so we hooked up with them. They helped us promote a lot. But this all started, as you said, with our son Troy. At 6 years old, he got diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. He's had to endure and grow up in some ways much earlier than you would hope any child has to. And it led to some tough situations. He's got a twin brother who's really athletic, and things seem to come really natural for him. And for Troy, a lot of things were he had to work harder to get the same type of results, and all the things that go with that. Is it fair? Well, no, it's not fair. It's not fair at all. Why me? All those kind of things. And he went through some tough times, and that's where it's wild being parents of 2 kids who are so based in their life experiences already changed so much by the time they're 6 years old that you can't parent them the same way. And I'm probably fortunate to have a sports background to where you have teammates that have to be coached differently, and then but I'm ultimately very lucky to have a wife who has a psychology degree, so she can navigate all of us kind of through this a little bit and try and so that everybody comes out on top. And he's doing great now. He's at Stephen F. Austin. He's pursuing music education degree. He's kind of found his lane, and it took a little longer because we're not a musically inclined family. I got kicked out of my church choir, so it's not, and not for actions, from actually just singing. They just you don't get kicked out. They just forget to tell you when the next get together is. And so, he's found it. He's grasped on. He's got some people who are his people. Yeah. And he struggled in his first semester at college, and now he's doing fantastic. And it's, as a parent, I don't know that we even had anything to do with it, but I'm so happy for him that he's just happy.
That gives you joy, and that gives Linda joy when your kids are happy. I love that. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes of the foundation. I really, as a matter of fact, I have your Strikeout Diabetes right here for those of you that are listening. Right? Oh, Chris is showing me right now his wrist bracelet, and I have my little plaque from the year that I was part of that. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I wanted people to hear that story.
And I know you're never one to thump your own chest, but you were tremendously helpful to us with that fundraiser we did. We raised, I guess, $500,000 over several years, and the volunteers are the lion's share of that. And you were super, super helpful. Did so many things without being asked. Showed us showed us things that we could do to be better in such a graceful way that that we were able to implement it. And even after we're several years in, you're like, had things that helped us improve along the way. And we are very grateful for your input and for your contribution to something that couldn't have been done without the help of a small village.
Man,
Certainly.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. Hey, I'm going to shift over to, I got one more question, then I'm going to shift to the last part of the show. And I always like to ask my guests on the show if they've ever been given any advice. It was just so good. Maybe it was early in your career. Maybe it's been later in your career. It was just so good. You find yourself sharing with others.
I mean, it's actually very simple, but as having a couple of high school kids, one thing that repeated over and over, because high school is so much about everybody wanting to be like everybody else, but that average is overrated. I mean, who wants to be average? And if you want to be exceptional at anything, if you want to be in the 1%, then you have to be willing to do what 99% aren't willing to do. And so, and Troy specifically, because he being diabetic and having he was automatically different. I understand college is going to be way more your thing, because now people who are individuals they're embraced and cherished in college versus high school. It seems to be, very much you get separated from the crowd. And I said, being separated is not a bad thing. That's the average crowd. You don't want to be average. Be exceptional, make a difference, do things they're not doing, and don't worry about it. We got you.
I love that.
He's found that part now. He wants to be a teacher. That's obviously not the most lucrative field in the world. He loves to fish. He loves the fact that a band teacher gave him an instrument when he was 12 years old that changed his whole trajectory and gave him something he was better at than everyone in our family, and by and large everyone in the immediate area. So he was, he plays the bassoon. He plays 6 different instruments now, and he's in working towards a professional where he can teach, make that difference to some other kids, and then fish in the summer and do what he wants to do. And, he has a high chance of being rich in life because he knows what he likes already, which at his age, I don't think I knew for sure where it might lead.
I love that. Rich in life. Be the exception. Great, great, great advice. I love that. We're going to shift to, it's time to accelerate. I got a fun few questions as we round out the show. First question I want to ask is, was there one memorable tournament or one memorable match in your career? I mean, you've had a lot. Can you think of one?
Yeah, I'm super lucky. I have a lot of things I can look back on. For me personally, it was winning the US Open. I was right after I'd been on like 16 shows without a win. Now you're the biggest choke artist. I'm the Buffalo Bills of bowling. Just ignore the fact that you're good enough to get there. You just don't win on TV. And it has its own life. Well, now I have to double in the 10th on the hardest thing we bowl on the whole year or striking the ninth, first one in the 10th to win, throw that strike, get 9 spare, win by 1, and win, my first major after a self-perceived. I felt like the whole world was judging me. And so that was, and it kind of freed me up to get to the next levels again and stop listening to the things that were trying to pull me back. The other side of it was watching Linda bowl on CBS and beat Sean Rash in a giant arena spectacle. That was one of the most fun things, was watching her take down one of our peers from the PBA Tour. And then she dominated the World Cup over in Slovenia, where she beat the women, the men, the whole thing. And some of those are great. And now getting to watch my son. Yeah. My moments now, which I thought were the best things that could ever happen to me, they were almost secondary to the successes and watching what they have. And like I said, when your kids do things, it fills you in a way you didn't know you could be filled.
That's awesome. I love that. I got chills like you just sharing that story of the US Open. You're like, that moment, I could just feel that. I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, we're here in November. This show is being played. And I want to ask you this. Thanksgiving's around the corner. What are you grateful for?
I mean, the opportunities in the life that's been afforded to me without really, I certainly didn't deserve all the good things that happened to me through bowling. But having met my wife through that, haven't gotten to travel the world and experience different cultures and have friends and see life through a different lens than certainly I ever would have if I'd have stayed in Topeka, Kansas, and you know, worked on the landscaping crew at the Capitol ground. I don't need, at stuff I never did foresee it going that direction. It is a wild, crazy ride that we've been on, and it's given me freedom to spend at times way more time with my family than I thought. And unfortunately, at others, it means I'm on the road and missed a few more things than I would like. And but it's given us a great life and some opportunities that I never thought would happen. And now I guess what I'm thinking, it's allowed us. We're having the 18th annual Barnes Thanksgiving Classic. It's for youth bowlers right here in Plano in Texas. And I guess we're up to, I lose track of the number, but about $500,000 in scholarships that we've given out over the years to youth bowlers to go to college and go on, from guys like Anthony Simonson, who's now a star on the PBA tour, to my nephew who bowled one time and made made enough to help pay for a couple of classes now. So it's happy to finally be able to in a position to give back and do some things for some other people and hope they get the opportunity to at least pursue that dream for a little while longer. And whether it works out or not, if it gets them an education along the way, then that's the win for us.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to put a link to that tournament in the show notes as well. That's fantastic because that is coming up. Hey, final question I have. This is probably my favorite question. Chris, 10 years older. He's around the corner. He's knocking at your door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
Man, put the fork down. Yeah. No, I think it's really get off the couch and stay active. Now that we're kind of empty nesters, it's easy to not do as much. We're not as busy. Not going out to practice with them. There's not as much going on. And so it has shifted a little bit, and age and injuries have come into it. So it's not as much fun to go and practice and do some of those things as it used to be. But I have to get better at setting, readjusting what those goals are every day. The rule of three that some of your guests have talked about in that, and still having those three goals, and then going out and making sure I get them done. And even though they're not the same ones like they were for a long time, well, I'm going to practice today. I'm going to get this. And then, some things off a punch list, got to find some ways to be better about setting those goals and seeing that improvement along the way, not just getting things done.
Yeah.
But
I love
moving
that.
forward. And I got to get better at that. And I guess I was looking back, I'd say, hey, he 62 may not look so good if you don't get this thing started at 52. So
I love that. That's a wise 10 years older Chris Barnes. We didn't even talk about, you've had 3 wins already this year on the tour. You're still rolling, man. I appreciate you just coming on the show, sharing your wisdom, your perspective. Listen, I've admired you for a long, long time. Been a big fan of Chris Barnes, and you definitely are just living life in the leadership lane. And I appreciate you and all you do for the sport of bowling. I can't wait to see, what's ahead for you. Hey, for those who are listening, they're like, hey, you know what? Chris said something on the show. I'd like to follow up, or I'd like to just follow him. How's the best way for someone to follow you?
Well, I mean, we have that show on the Beef and Barnzy Show. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. Chris Barnes official page. That's where I post things about tour life and general bowling things. Twitter, I'm at Barnes PBA, and the same for Instagram. But those two are obviously the younger crowd more so. Facebook's I'm way more on there. But that Beef and Barnzy Show, that's it's an interactive show. If you're on there, you ask a question, pretty much answer it every day. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. If you're into bowling and you want technical questions, we serve a crowd that doesn't get much service. But if we have beginners in there all the time, and or people are just going to go, hey, yeah, what was Erie, Pennsylvania like? Well, Here we go.
And I've been away from it for a little while, and my brother was getting a bowling ball recently, and I'm like, Chris, what bowling ball do I need here? So
Yeah.
great resource for bowling. But hey, listen, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you coming on the show. I'm grateful for our friendship, and again, I cannot wait to see what's ahead for you and your entire family.
Well, I love what you're doing here. It's been fun catching episodes along the way, and then of course, you know, I had to do a little homework too, and so I watched a few more, and I learned a few things along the way. So it hasn't stopped how many I'm going to watch. I'm going to end up having to go through a bunch of them now, and I'm guessed like 130 or whatever. You got to the bottom of the barrel now, so I'm going to find out all those people that are smarter than me and see if I can learn a little bit more along the way too. So I love what you're doing here. Thanks for letting me be a tiny part of it, and good luck on the rest of the way.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, Chris.
Thank you.